Imagine walking into a room full of people you've never met before. You haven't even said your name yet, but the first words you speak already start to shape how everyone sees you. Is your voice steady and confident, or a little hesitant? Do you sound formal and polished, or casual and laid back? Every single word you say, every pause you take, even your tone, it's all giving away little pieces of information. It's revealing where you're from, what you're feeling, maybe even what you're insecure about. But here's something most people don't realize. The way you speak doesn't just reflect who you are. It actually influences who you become. It impacts how people treat you. It shapes your self-image, and it can even determine what opportunities come your way. Language isn't just about getting ideas across. It's a mirror of the mind and a window into your personality. So in this video, we're diving deep into something most of us never stop to think about: the psychology of speech. Why you talk the way you do, what your voice reveals, and how small tweaks in your speech can have a huge impact on your life. Let's start at the very beginning. From the moment you're born, you start absorbing language like a sponge. By the time you're 5 years old, before you even know it, most of your core speech patterns are already locked in. Researchers have found that early experiences, the voices you hear growing up, the way your parents or teachers speak, all of that gets wired into your brain. That's why people raised in different environments talk so differently. Your accent, the words you use, even the rhythm of your sentences, all of that tells a story about your background. But here's the kicker. We don't just copy what we hear. Language is deeply personal. It's an identity marker. The famous linguist Noam Chomsky suggested that our brains are hardwired with something called universal grammar, an inbuilt ability to learn language. But the specific way we speak, that comes from culture, community, and experience. It's why you can often tell where someone's from or what kind of community they grew up in just by listening to them talk. Your speech is like a social fingerprint. It says, "This is who I am." But let's go deeper. Language doesn't just reflect identity, it shapes it. Cognitive psychologists have been exploring this for decades. There's a theory called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and it basically says that the language you speak influences the way you think. Crazy, right? But here's an example. In some languages, there are 5 or 6 different words for what English speakers would just call sadness. Each word describes a slightly different shade of sadness. So for people who speak that language, they're not just feeling sad, they're experiencing a specific type of sadness and have the vocabulary to label and explore it. That richer vocabulary actually allows them to feel and process emotions in a more nuanced way. So what does that mean for you? It means your everyday speech isn't just a reflection of how you think, it's shaping how you think. The words you choose become the lens through which you experience the world.
Let's zoom in on something you probably do every day without realizing it: code switching. You know how you speak one way with your friends and totally differently in a job interview? That's code switching. It's the ability to shift your speech based on your environment. And it's not just a neat trick, it's a survival skill. In formal settings, we tend to use more structured sentences, professional vocabulary, and careful pronunciation. That kind of speech can signal intelligence, credibility, or leadership potential. In casual settings, we relax our tone, use slang, and maybe speak with more emotion or speed. That helps build connection and trust. You probably switch between these styles all the time. And that ability to adapt, it shows just how powerful and flexible language really is. But it also reveals something deeper: how much power is tied to the way we speak. Let's talk about that power dynamic for a second. Research shows that certain vocal traits, like clarity, confidence, and tone, can influence how others perceive us. People with steady, calm voices are more likely to be seen as leaders. People who speak with hesitation or uncertainty might be taken less seriously even if their ideas are brilliant. And unfortunately, this leads to something a lot of people face: linguistic bias. Let's say someone has a strong regional accent or speaks in a dialect that's less standard. Others might subconsciously judge them as less educated or less competent, even though that's completely inaccurate. It happens in job interviews, school, customer service, even in dating. That's how deeply rooted these speech-based stereotypes can be. Your voice, your accent, your tone, your pace can either open doors or close them.
Now, take a second to reflect on your own speech. Have you ever changed the way you talk just to fit in? Maybe softened your accent, avoided certain words, or tried to sound more professional? That's not just about communication. That's about identity and survival. But here's the good news. Just like speech can be shaped by your environment, you can shape it too. You can refine your tone, work on your pacing, improve your articulation, not to become someone else, but to make sure your voice represents who you really are, at your best. Understanding how speech works gives you a massive edge. You'll start to see how people respond to different tones, how language shifts in different spaces, and how subtle changes in your voice can completely transform how you're perceived. And here's the real breakthrough. You are not stuck with the way you learned to speak as a kid. Your voice is not a fixed trait. It's a tool. And like any tool, you can sharpen it. You can train yourself to speak with more confidence. You can learn to control your tone and pace. You can choose your words more intentionally. This doesn't mean being fake or putting on an act. It means being in control. It means making sure that the way you speak matches the way you want to be heard. And in the next part of this video, we're going even deeper. We'll explore how your speech patterns reveal hidden parts of your personality, how they affect your relationships, and the surprising science behind how vocal tone can change not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. And trust me, the last insight, it's the one that could change the way you communicate for the rest of your life.
Let's pick up where we left off, because now we're diving into the really fascinating stuff. Have you ever noticed how some people just own the room the moment they start talking? They don't even have to say anything extraordinary, it's just something about the way they speak. Their voice grabs attention, people lean in, they listen. So what is it? Is it charisma? Is it confidence? Is it just a gift some people are born with? Actually, it's psychology. Let's break it down. Researchers have been studying speech and personality for years, and here's what they've found. Your speech patterns, things like how fast you talk, how your pitch rises and falls, the words you tend to use, they're all tied to your personality traits. For example, extroverts, they usually talk faster. Their tone goes up and down more. They sound lively, energetic, and spontaneous. Introverts, on the other hand, often speak more slowly. Their tone is more even. They might pause longer between thoughts. And it's not that they're shy, it's just a different kind of presence, a more measured delivery. But it goes beyond that. A psychologist named James Pennebaker did some fascinating research on how the words we use reveal what's going on inside. He looked at the frequency of tiny, seemingly meaningless words like I, we, but, because, and even filler words like and you know. And guess what? Those tiny words can predict things like emotional state, confidence levels, and even whether someone is more self-focused or community-minded. So yeah, your choice of words says a lot more than you think. But let's zoom out. It's not just your personality that shows up in your speech, your emotions do too. You can usually tell how someone's feeling just by how they talk, even if they don't say it directly. When someone's anxious, their pitch tends to go up. They might speak a little faster, use more filler words, hesitate more. You hear things like, I'm not sure, or I was just kind of thinking. But when someone feels confident, it's like night and day. They take their time, they speak clearly, their tone is steady, and they're not afraid of silence. They'll pause instead of rushing to fill the space.
Now here's something wild. The way you speak doesn't just reflect your emotions, it can actually change them. This idea comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. Therapists have found that if you act confident, even if you're not feeling it, your brain starts to catch up. The same is true with speech. If you start speaking with more energy, more intention, more control, you'll start to feel more in control. It's like a feedback loop. Your brain hears your voice and goes, "Oh, we sound confident. I guess we are confident." You're not faking it. You're rewiring yourself in real time. Let's bring this down to a real-life example. Job interviews. You've probably heard that content matters. Of course it does. But when you're sitting across from a hiring manager, your tone, pace, and delivery matter just as much, sometimes more. If you talk too fast, you might come across as nervous. If you mumble, you might seem unsure of yourself, even if you're saying something brilliant. But if you speak clearly, slow your pace just a bit, and use pauses in the right places, you'll come across as confident, composed, and thoughtful. And guess what? People trust that. Now let's talk about relationships. How many arguments or misunderstandings start not because of what someone said, but how they said it? You've probably experienced this before. Someone says, "I'm fine," but the tone? Totally off. Maybe it's flat, maybe it's cold, maybe it's a little too sharp. So even though the words are neutral, the emotional message is loud and clear. They are definitely not fine. That's the power of emotional tone. It's the difference between someone feeling heard and someone feeling dismissed. When you start paying attention to the way you speak and the way others do, you'll notice these little signals everywhere. It's not about being a communication robot. It's about emotional intelligence. Understanding tone, timing, and delivery helps you connect with people more deeply and avoid a lot of unnecessary tension. So, how do you actually get better at this? How do you train your voice to have more impact? Great question, because some of the world's most persuasive speakers didn't just wake up one day with magnetic voices. They studied, they practiced, they learned how to use their voice intentionally. Let's take Martin Luther King Jr. His famous "I Have a Dream" speech is remembered not just for the words, but for the delivery, the rhythm, the emotion, the repetition, the pauses. He didn't just speak, he performed, and it worked. Or take someone like Steve Jobs. His keynote speeches were simple, even quiet, but every word felt deliberate. Every pause was there for a reason. He had presence, not because he was loud, but because he was clear. This is what we call vocal influence. It's the ability to speak with intention, to use tone, volume, and pacing like tools in a toolbox, to move people, not just with your words, but with how you deliver them. And here's the secret most people miss. When you train your voice, you're not just changing how others see you, you're changing how you see yourself. There's something called self-perception theory, and it says that we build beliefs about ourselves based on what we observe ourselves doing. So if you start hearing yourself speak clearly, confidently, calmly, your brain starts to say, hey, I am a clear, confident, calm person. Your speech shapes your identity, which means that every time you choose to speak with intention, you're building a stronger, more grounded version of yourself.
Now, before we wrap up this part, let's get practical. What can you start doing right now to take control of your voice? Record yourself speaking. Seriously, just talk about something you care about and listen back. You'll learn a ton about your tone, pace, and filler words. Practice slowing down. Most people talk too fast, especially when they're nervous. Pausing gives your thoughts space and your listener time to absorb. Cut the fillers. Replace and like with short pauses. It feels weird at first, but it instantly makes you sound more confident. Play with pitch and tone. Try reading a sentence with different emotions. Notice how your voice shifts. This builds vocal range and awareness. Speak with intention. Before you talk, take half a second to think, what do I want this to sound like? The more you do this, the more control you'll have over your presence. And over time, your voice will become one of your biggest assets, not just for communicating, but for shaping your future. In the next part, we're going to explore the common speech habits that undermine your credibility, how to build a powerful vocal presence, and the science behind storytelling that can make your message unforgettable. And trust me, the final insight at the end of that section, it's the one that ties everything together. Let's get into the practical, game-changing stuff. How to actually use your voice as a powerful tool in everyday life. You've probably heard the phrase, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Turns out, that's not just a saying. It's backed by science. A famous study by psychologist Albert Mehrabian found that in conversations about feelings or attitudes, only 7% of communication comes from the actual words. The rest? 38% from tone of voice and 55% from body language. Now, does that mean words don't matter? Of course not. But it does mean that the way you sound, your pace, your pitch, your energy, carries a huge amount of weight. So let's talk about vocal presence, what it is, why it matters, and how you can build it. Have you ever heard someone speak and immediately felt drawn in? Not because they were shouting or overly dramatic, but because their voice had this calm, steady gravity to it. That's vocal presence. It's not about being loud, it's about being in control. It's about speaking in a way that makes people pay attention. And the first piece of the puzzle, control your pitch. Studies show that lower-pitched voices are often perceived as more authoritative and trustworthy. That's why politicians, CEOs, and media personalities often work with voice coaches to develop a deeper, more grounded tone. Margaret Thatcher famously underwent vocal training to lower her natural pitch because people took her more seriously when her voice carried more weight. But again, you don't need to sound like James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman. It's not about faking a voice. It's about finding a stable, intentional tone that projects confidence.
Next up, pacing. Here's the deal. Most people talk too fast when they're nervous. It's like your brain's racing ahead of your mouth. But when you slow down, even just a little, you send a completely different message. You say, I'm not in a rush, I'm in control. I know what I'm saying matters. Varying your pace is also super important. Speed up when you're excited. Slow down when you want to emphasize something. The contrast keeps people engaged. And then there's the pause. A well-placed pause is like bolding a sentence in your speech. It gives your words space to land. It creates tension. It makes people lean in. Most of us are terrified of silence, so we fill it with like, you know. But when you replace those fillers with intentional pauses, you instantly sound more thoughtful and credible. Try it. The next time you're speaking in front of a group, or even just telling a story to a friend, pause and let your words hang in the air for a second. It works. Now let's talk about articulation. Clear speech equals confident speech. It's not about using big, fancy words. It's about making sure the words you do use are heard and understood. Slurring or mumbling your words can make even the most brilliant person sound unsure. That's why many great speakers practice enunciation. They'll literally read out loud, exaggerating each syllable, like actors rehearsing lines, then slowly dial it back until it sounds natural. So if you find yourself trailing off, dropping syllables, or swallowing words, that's something worth working on. Articulation builds clarity, and clarity builds trust.
So if you find yourself trailing off, dropping syllables, or swallowing words, that's something worth working on. Articulation builds clarity, and clarity builds trust. But clarity alone isn't enough. Let's talk about the emotional layer, the feel behind the words. Ever listen to someone talk in a totally flat, emotionless voice? Even if their content is gold, it just doesn't land. Emotion is what brings your message to life. It's what makes your words matter. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be over the top. In fact, too much emotion can backfire. It can sound dramatic or fake. The key is alignment. Your tone should match your message. If you're telling a story that's exciting, let your voice show that excitement. If you're sharing something serious, let your tone be steady, calm, and sincere. Because here's the truth. People don't just listen to your words. They feel your energy. And if your voice doesn't match your message, that disconnect creates doubt. Speaking of feeling, there's one more vocal superpower we have to cover: storytelling. Stories are the oldest form of communication, and for a reason. The human brain is wired to respond to stories. We remember them, we connect to them, we see ourselves in them. That's why some of the most memorable speeches in history aren't just a list of facts or bullet points. They're narratives. Great speakers use personal stories, vivid imagery, and relatable moments to hook you emotionally. But storytelling isn't just what you say, it's how you say it. The most powerful storytellers perform their stories. They shift tone for different characters. They build tension with pacing. They pause before key moments. They emphasize the emotional beats. And when they do it right, you don't just hear the story, you feel like you were in the story.
So if you want to be more engaging, more memorable, more influential, get better at telling stories. Practice them, refine them, deliver them with intention. Now, let's bring all of this together. Think about your own speaking habits. Do you use a lot of filler words? Do you talk too fast? Do you trail off at the end of your sentences? Do you avoid eye contact or sound unsure? What would change in your life if you started to own your voice? How would people respond differently if you sounded calm, clear, and confident, even when you're nervous? Here's what would change. They'd listen. They'd respect what you say. They'd be influenced by your ideas. And over time, you'd start to believe it too. Because the way you speak doesn't just shape how others see you, it shapes how you see yourself. Let's end with the transformative truth behind everything we've talked about. Your voice doesn't just express who you are, it creates who you become. Every time you speak, you're reinforcing an identity, consciously or not. When you speak with hesitation, your mind internalizes doubt. When you speak with purpose and strength, your mind reinforces confidence.
So if you want to step into a new version of yourself, someone more articulate, more respected, more heard, you don't need to change who you are. You just need to change how you speak. Start small. Record yourself. Cut the fillers. Slow down. Speak with intention. Then do it again. And again. And watch what happens. People will treat you differently. You'll treat yourself differently. Not because you pretended to be someone else, but because you finally let the real you come through, clearly, confidently, and without apology. So go out there, use your voice, because the way you speak, it doesn't just communicate your thoughts, it builds your future. Thanks for watching.